Good afternoon. Welcome to the May 20th, 2021 Teachers Retirement System Board meeting. I'm going to start by calling the roll. Just get my roll sheet. Okay, John Adler.
I'm here.
Thomas Brown.
I'm here, Patricia. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Natalie Green-Giles.
I'm here.
David Gazansky.
Present.
Russell Buckley.
Present for CFO Lindsay Oates.
Deborah Penny.
I'm here.
And Susanna Vickers.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Okay.
So item on our agenda, I'm going to turn it over to the chair who wants to set some ground rules.
Yeah, thank you so much. So first I want to welcome Mel Aronson, former trustee and chairman of the board emeritus. Welcome, Mel. We're so glad that you joined us. We have a lot of visitors here today. Welcome to everyone. We have a pretty lengthy agenda today, so I am going to ask that when the trustees want to speak, that you please raise your hand so I could make sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak in an orderly manner. Liz, do you want to just explain the raise hand option in case there's a question or problem?
Sure. So at the bottom of your screen where you see the microphone symbol and the camera symbol, you should see a happy face with a little plus on it. I'm gonna see if I can share my screen so I can show you. Nope, I can't do that. But there's a happy face with a plus. If you click on it, you'll see it says raise hand. It'll have a yes button, a no button, a slower button. So that's where you would go to raise your hand. It's the happy face with the plus.
Okay.
Where do we go to unraise or up? Right there, same place to lower.
Yes. And if you have a problem or any technical issues, I will also acknowledge a hand raise, old school style. So thank you guys.
All right, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, so next on the agenda is an update on TRS operations, and Kavita Kanwar is going to give us that update.
Good afternoon, everybody. Starting this month, TRS employees began returning to work on site in staggered cohorts. And on May 3rd, our Member Services Center opened for in-person consultation by appointment. In the first 2 weeks, we saw an average of 10 appointments per day, and that number is expected to increase. Also, earlier this month, about 33,000 retired members and beneficiaries received information from TRS about their 2021 required minimum distribution from their TDA accounts. The IRS waived the RMD last year, so this is the first TDA RMD since 2019. Members have until October 31st to choose how to meet the requirements, or else TRS will send them a distribution at the year end. Thank you.
Thanks, Kavita.
Kavita, I'm sorry, can you mail that to, email that to us, the trustees?
Sure. Yes,
Thanks,
absolutely.
Kavita. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention that in addition to the appointments for meeting with our member services representatives, we are continuing our Zoom consultations, which are very popular with our members. So as well as seeing people here in the office, we're also continuing Zoom consultations with them. Thank you, Kavita. So next on the agenda is the Executive Director's report. And the first item on the report is the matter of the next meeting, which has been scheduled for June 17th, 2021. So we should just all make sure that's on our calendar. Okay, and so next is the on the agenda, on the EDR, is the resolution for the annual meeting of the Teachers Retirement Board. And in accordance with section 13-509 of the Administrative Code of the City of New York, as well as the Article 2 of the bylaws of the Teachers Retirement Board, shall elect a chairperson for its membership at the annual meeting to be held in May of each year. We therefore open the floor for nominations. Do I have any nominations?
I nominate Deborah Penny.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? So congratulations, the resolution passes.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to continue as your chairman of the board.
Great. All right, so next on the executive director's report is the variable program emerging market review policy.
Please skip to the resolve.
Resolved that to mitigate investment and reputational risk, the variable program emerging market review policy is adopted. The following, all right, so.
Okay, great. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Vickers. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
The next item on the executive director's report is the administrative budget for fiscal year 2022. And
Please skip to the resolve.
Resolved that the TRS agency budget for fiscal year 2022, excluding modernization and the Galeno project, shall include an amount of $22,713,034. Attributable, excuse me, I lost my place. Attributable to the variable annuity program and loan expense funds, and $42,423,285 attributed to the employer for a total agency budget, excluding modernization and Galeno, of $65,139,319. And be it further resolved that the TRS agency budget for fiscal year 2022 shall include for the modernization program the amount of $12,911,393 to be provided by the variable annuity expense funds, and $5,018,607 to be provided as the administrative expense contribution for a total modernization budget of $17,900,000. And be it further resolved that the TRS agency budget for fiscal year 2021, I think it's 2022, shall include for Galeno work the amount of $8,027,675 to be provided by the variable annuity expense funds, and $4,977,325 to be provided as an administrative expense contribution for a total Galeno budget of $13,005,000. And be it further resolved that the trustees hereby authorize the executive director or her designee to expend monies out of such budget to fund necessary operations in accordance with the approved budget and governing laws.
Wow. You need to take a breath now. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kazansky. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Vickers. Any discussion? Okay, all those.
No, well, there's hands up.
A discussion. Look at that, Russell Buckley.
Thanks. I was just unaware if this material had actually been provided. I don't see a budget in any of the materials that I'm looking at, so I would appreciate if someone could.
Well, we have.
I have the resolution in front of me, but I don't know if there's any detailed information that was planned to be provided to the board ahead of voting on the resolution.
We normally share the budget with the budget committee. And once the budget committee approves it, we bring the resolution to the full board.
Got it. So there was no detailed budget plan to be shared with the full board then? Just the budget committee? Which
we don't normally do that.
Okay. I'm just making sure I know
if,
what I'm voting on. If I'm just voting on the resolution in total amounts?
Well,
yes.
Right.
Yeah, so the budget committee has been given all the details. They approved this. They sent it to the board. Do you know who's on the budget committee, Russell? People who are on the budget committee, do you want to raise your hand so Russell knows who has been in part of this meeting? So David,
John Adler, David Kazansky, Susanna Vickers.
Yeah, I guess I'm just asking if I can have any level of detail other than just the numbers in the resolution. I would appreciate it.
I'm happy to share the material that I have with you,
Great.
Russell, unless the Rosa can just share it directly. Otherwise, yeah.
Okay.
I would actually just.
But it's
recommend,
not to be shared with anybody else or any other you know, I mean, it should be somewhat confidential to the board, right?
Right. I think I would recommend as a best practice that the budget be provided to the entire board, so they are voting on something that they know that's in it, because I don't think the budget committees are the only ones that have insights into the budget, but that's just my thought on the process. I have another question just to raise. OMB submitted some questions that we got answers to, and this is for you, Rosa. There's one question that I just didn't see the answer to, which is that I believe the head count is actually being raised from 338 to 340. Is that right? Do I have that right, Rosa?
Yes, that's correct.
And so what are the two new positions in the head count?
I could answer that, Patricia, unless you want to answer that, I can answer that.
There are two senior developers for the IT department. We're bringing two new people on in order to get them acclimated and up to date, so that in the next few years, as we start to transition away from consultants, they've had the time with TRS to understand our complex technologies and complex systems. So, and we did just respond to that final question to the budget committee. So it's two senior developers for our Aspen system.
Thank you.
Any further questions before we take this for a vote?
Yes, I used the raise hand just to follow up on what John asked about increased headcount. Since I don't have the detail, I was just curious, is this budget flat? Is it an increase over last year? Just the administrative piece. Is there a percentage?
It's flat budget.
Flat. So even with the additional headcount, the budget's flat?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, great. Okay, and then in that case, since we finished discussion, do all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so the budget carries.
And let me just add before we move on to the next resolution, my thanks to Rosa and to Bob and the whole team. It was a tough year regardless of the budget, and the work that they did to get it all fleshed out was impressive, and I thank them for it.
Great, yes, thank you. Thank you, team.
Okay.
Patricia.
Next on the agenda is the approval of an amendment to the rules and regulations of the Board of Education retirement system.
Please skip to the resolve.
Resolved that the TRS board approves the amendment to section 5A of the borough's rules and regulations to authorize an employee member of the Board of Trustees to temporarily appoint an interim alternate employee member in the event of a vacancy in the office of alternate employee member until a special election can be held to fill such vacancy.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Adler. Any discussion? Any questions about it? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
The next resolution is attendance at a conference. The following resolution is presented for consideration and possible adoption. Resolved that the trustees of the Teachers Retirement Board hereby approve the attendance and participation of the executive director and or her designees and any interested trustee at the National Conference on Public Employees Retirement Systems 2021 Public Pension Funding Forum from August 22nd through August 24th, 2021.
Okay, and I believe that will be one of the first in-person conferences. Am I right, Mr. Kazansky?
That is true.
Okay.
And that's being held here in New York?
That
yes.
is also true.
All right, okay. So when that comes out, you'll let us know, and any trustees interested will respond accordingly. Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kazansky and Ms. Vickers tie. Any questions about it? Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, on to the next conference.
Next is attendance at a conference. Resolved that the trustees of the Teachers Retirement Board hereby approve the attendance and participation of the executive director and or her designees and any interested trustee at the National Conference on Public Employees Retirement System 2021 Fall Conference from September 26th through September 28th, 2021.
Thank you. And again, an in-person conference, and when the information comes out, it'll be circulated. If you're interested, you can attend if this motion passes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
John,
Adler. Oh, Mr. Brown will take that as a second.
Thank you.
Any discussion or questions about it? Excellent. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, I think we're going to change the order around a little bit, Patricia, and we'll go to.
I think you should look at the. All right, let me just look at what I have.
Well, I'll take the cue from you, whichever one you.
I think if you look at your text, there's an updated screen from that. I think it's just right. my EDR is in the right order, but the agenda was out of order.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Whatever you say, I will go.
If you can take a look at.
Yes, this looks great.
Okay. So the next item is. Sorry, I'm just trying to get it up on mine. The actuary's fiscal year 2020 reimbursement calculation resulting from Chapter 41 of the laws of 2016.
Please skip to the resolve.
Okay, resolved that the TRS Board of Trustees approves a voucher in the amount of $501,773 for fiscal year 2020 to be submitted to the State Comptroller for audit warrant and payment to TRS as reimbursement for carrying out the provisions of Chapter 41.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Oops, thank you, Mr. Adler. And I think Mr. Kazansky did a second there. Any discussion, questions about this? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries.
The next resolution is the actuary's recommendation regarding the Tier 3-4 loan insurance premium for fiscal year 2022.
Right. Please skip to the resolve.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby adopts the recommendation of the actuary as stated in her report dated May 13th, 2021, and stipulates the Tier 3, 4, and 6 loan insurance premium rate for be continued as its current rate of 0.10% per annum of the outstanding loan balance for any loans originating during fiscal year 2022, i.e. July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Adler. Any discussion, questions regarding it? Okay, then all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Madam Chair, I did neglect to let the actuary give her May 2021 fiscal note.
Right.
Do we want to do that before we go on?
Sure, absolutely. Madam Actuary.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Madam Executive Director. There were 2 fiscal notes in the last month. This was delivered to the board earlier this month before the board meeting. One of them is the for the World Trade Center notice of participation form. In the past, or currently even, it can only be submitted hard copy in paper, and this bill would allow for it to be submitted electronically. Because there might be some administrative expenses that are associated with that, with either staff time or setting up systems, it could theoretically have a change in the employer contribution, because one of the components of the employer contribution is the administrative expenses. But we did calculate this to be de minimis in terms of the additional contributions. The second one was to mandate the paraprofessionals into TRS. This is, it would affect 3,300 paraprofessionals, but only 1,500 of them would be new paraprofessionals, because the remaining 1,800 is projected to have elected into TRS anyway. This bill would just accelerate their election into TRS. So we didn't account for those additional costs, just the 1,500 who otherwise would not have elected regardless of for currently without the bill. So with the bill, with these 1,500 additional paraprofessionals, the additional contribution is projected to be approximately $4.6 million per year.
Okay, thank you so much for those. Does anyone have any questions for the actuary about these? No? Okay. All right, Patricia, I think we're ready to continue.
Okay, so next is the, well, let me just make.
Authorization of rebalancing.
Okay, next is the authorization of rebalancing of funds for the New York City Teachers Retirement System.
Please skip to the resolve.
Resolved that the board adopts the actuary's recommendation and authorizes TIRA staff to effectuate the internal rebalancing in the amount of $34,648,543 from the PASPA fund to the QPP fund in accordance with such recommendations.
Thank you, Patricia. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kazansky. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Adler. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries.
Next is the actuary's determination for the final fiscal year 2021 employer contribution to the New York City Teachers Retirement System.
Again, please skip to the resolve.
Resolved that the employer contribution to the New York City Teachers Retirement System for fiscal year 2021 in the amount of $3,148,251,747 is hereby approved by the Board of Trustees.
Thank you, Patricia. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Adler. Do I hear a second? Come on.
Second.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Buckley. Any discussion? Okay, so I actually have a couple of questions that I'm not really sure of. So I'm very concerned with this. This is all based on the actuarial assumptions and methods that were brought to our board in January. And in January, we kind of kicked the can down the road. We had a lot of questions for the actuary. We weren't sure that we wanted to approve something like this. There was a package, and parts of the package we were totally in favor of, and parts of the package we weren't. Then this was brought, and it came in January, it came every month, and then in May, the actuary took it off the table. And so when it was taken off the table, we assumed that that was the end of it. But now this presents a problem, because this is all with, so we have a 7% AIR, and this resolution is assuming that that whole package went through and the AIR has changed. And since that is legislatively changed and it has not been changed, I don't know how we can bring this to the board to vote on something that's not proper, something that's definitely not our fiduciary duty. We cannot vote on something that hasn't been changed by legislation. And so I have a lot of questions about that. It also talks about a restart. And again, everything is all mixed into this. And It just doesn't seem right. And again, we never voted on it. So does anyone else have any questions? And then we'll certainly ask Madam Actuary to talk about it. Anything anyone else wants to talk about or any questions about this? I know that the legislation does sunset on June 30th, but again, this was assuming that it was 6.95, which it is not.
Yeah, I mean, I have if I may, Deb.
Sure.
I have the benefit of having had this discussion at other boards, and I'll just say that other boards definitely expressed similar concerns about the actuary bringing a package that's predicated on legislative action that hasn't occurred and doesn't have support or consensus from the trustees of the 5 city funds. I'd like, as we did at other boards, I think it would be appropriate to hear from the law department about the, I don't want to use legality, maybe someone could suggest a better word, but the properness of the propriety of voting on a number that contains a rate of return that's different than the mandated legal rate of return that's set by the legislature. So at this time, I'd like to ask the law department if they could opine and tell the board what the actuary is able to decide on her own, and what the actuary must have other parties like the legislature decide.
So I would ask that we go into attorney-client for this discussion.
Okay. All those in favor of going into attorney-client, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, abstentions. So we're going to go into attorney-client for this. Everyone else, stay tuned. Okay, we are back. Thank you so much for waiting. We're all together. So we were discussing a resolution when we left. Patricia, you want to remind everyone what resolution we were just discussing? We were discussing the actuary's determination for the final fiscal 2021 employer contribution. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? So last I spoke and I explained that I didn't feel comfortable voting on something like this because it was based on an AIR that is not in law. The law is 7% and this is based on a 6.95. Anyone else want to add anything to this? Mr. Buckley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Madam Actuary, Ms. Chan. I guess I'm just curious why the employer contribution has been calculated and presented to the boards with a proposed AIR and not the statutory AIR, and sort of what the calculus is in driving that, and whether there's any precedent for boards approving AIRs that are contingent upon them passing in legislation. And then I guess also what the implications would be if the board were to approve a contingent AIR based on legislation, or if they weren't to. Are there serious cash flow implications from this, or is this just a formality?
So this started with a review of the actuarial assumptions and methods. That's a practice that is done by actuaries of pension plans, throughout time. And once there is a package to be changed, usually every few years, it's presented to the board. The last time this was done was in 2019, and the time prior to that was in 2016. So this is part of the normal process of looking at assumptions and methods to make sure that we're calibrating the calculation to be as precise as possible given current demographic and economic information. So that's how this came about. The 7% being reduced down to 6.9% for fiscal year 21 is part of a larger package that includes changes to the mortality improvement scale, the actual value of assets, being remarked to the market value of assets as well as its methodology, and some other changes too. And when this was proposed, it was stated very explicitly that this should be adopted as a package. It is not prudent to be selecting one pieces of the package and not other pieces that are meant to balance each other out as a whole. There has been precedent of this being done, and in fact, the very last time that this was, the discount rate was decreased from 8% to 7%. There was a year or two in that time frame in 2012 that the prior chief actuary was using a proposed discount rate that ended up retroactively being passed, which is what the current legislation is drafted to be. And in terms of what kind of, what the effect is, if, going forward with the 6.95% measure is a more conservative measure. And if the state legislature does not pass it retroactively to be 6.95% and keeping it at 7%, then the calculations would be less. And that would be trued up in the next fiscal year if contributions were to move that way. Just my experience with the New York City retirement systems and the obligors that are associated with it and recouping money, I have seen that it is a lot easier for us to get the cash flow in sooner than to try to go the reverse and say that they did not pay enough for a prior fiscal year, track them down, and potentially have an interest penalty for the employers. So I don't know if I addressed all your questions, but if not, please repeat them and I'd be happy to answer them.
No, I think that was sufficient. Thank you, Sherry. Much appreciated.
Okay, so I'm prepared to support many of the actuaries' changes. Some of them make a lot of sense and we're 100% with that. What I am not comfortable again with is the AIR. I don't understand why, and I'm going to ask you to please recalculate this using what the law is, which is 7%. And I also want to tell everyone that we have put forth legislation for a 2-year extension of the 7%, and I'll be sending that to the actuary and asking for it fiscal note by next Tuesday. I know you have all of the numbers, you just have to update them a little bit, so I would appreciate that. The 7% again is the law. I am not comfortable voting for something that is not the law. The restart doesn't seem to make sense either. Our investments are doing very well now. This is a time when we first started this discussion, the city had difficulties. We're in a pandemic, a lot of problems. Since then, a lot of money has moved into the city. Instead of taking all of the money now, it makes sense to spread this out and do the smoothing for times when we might need more money. It puts the money in the city this year, next year, and as you go down, it's going to cost more money, and it might cost more money at a time when the city needs the money. Right? Anyone else want to add anything to it or discussion?
Madam Chair, can I respond to some of those comments? Okay. I just want to firstly, I know the fiscal note request is going to be forthcoming. I do want to say that those numbers are not calculated. So I don't want to set unrealistic expectations that it would be done by Tuesday. I'm just stating that for the record.
Very soon.
So we will definitely, treat the fiscal note with just as much priority as any other fiscal note. So I just want to state that. The other thing is this package was designed by looking at, like I said, the demographics and the economic assumptions and the environment that we're in. Yes, obviously, the times that we were experiencing earlier in the fiscal year, last calendar year, was one of the considerations taken in, but it was not the only consideration. And I did make sure that this package was designed such that it's still sound, regardless of whether the city got federal funding or not, and other aspects of it too. It does stand alone in being a prudent package in all the pieces that it's proposed. And the other comment I just want to say was the gains that we are experiencing, obviously the ones that we have experienced this past fiscal year to date, is not incorporated in it because the analysis was done prior to this. But not only are there further gains that are not included in it, I do want to make a point that because of the smoothing methodology, the savings, you had made a comment, Madam Chair, about like we could save these savings for later to be used. And because of the way that the asset smoothing is recognized, it is not always recognizing gains and definitely not recognizing gains at this level. So as we proceed, and if we weren't to restart the methodology, we get less and less of those gains to smooth in and could potentially be in a position where we'll be smoothing in losses. So these aren't, it's not like a savings account where it's, retains its value over time. It does have to deal with where the market is, and we may not have these gains in the future. So I just want to note that.
Thank you. Mr. Kazansky, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, so I just wanted to jump in because what I'm taking issue with is the notion that this is all a package. Because to me, it feels like more like a house of cards. The assumption is that, you pull one card out and the whole thing is going to collapse. And while I may have only been a sixth grade math teacher for part of my teaching career, there is a bunch of math that can be moved around and redone that I would imagine get us similar results, right? 2 + 2 is 4, but 1 + 3 is 4 also. And so I really feel like saying that this entire package must exist in exactly and only this way, it just doesn't feel like it's a fair way to propose this, right? We had asked for pieces to be taken out and kind of shown us how we save money by doing this way or that way, or changing this or not changing that. We really didn't get the level of detail on that we had hoped for before this was pulled. And I just feel that creating this very fragile construct where key to it all is a change in the ARR, which is no way guaranteed. Just feels like this is a calculation that's set up for failure. And I would rather do, as we had discussed, have one presented to us that represents the true AIR for this particular moment in time. And should the AIR change at any point in the future, then we can have a discussion at that point about how we can readjust and save money or reallocate going forward.
Madam Chair, may I respond?
Sure,
okay. So thank you, Mr. Kazansky. I will absolutely agree with you that this is not the only package that's going to make sense. The point that I was trying to make that it is being proposed as a package is that it can't be, picked, just one piece or there to be picked apart and for the package to remain intact otherwise. You are absolutely right that there are many, many different iterations of it, so that if you pull the card, so to speak, like you said, that there are other ways that there would be requirements for other levers to be adjusted in order for, again, it to be represented as a balanced portfolio.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions or anything else you'd like to say? Susanna? Ms. Vickers?
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of things. Just sort of specifically about this being a package. I just need to echo what I think some of my colleagues are saying, that it's unfortunate that we're at the point where there is severe disagreement between the trustees of all 5 boards and their actuary. There are many great changes that are included in this, changes to the assumptions and methods, that there is sort of universal approval of. And I would like to see us collectively moving forward on those and having more discussion on the items that are controversial, and that we don't have consensus on. The actuary mentioned as precedent 2012, when the boards approved employer contribution number that was based on a different AIR. And I think it's important to go back to 2012, because my understanding is the reason that was done is that there was consensus. There was a concerted effort between all the trustees and city partners like the actuary and the city administration to go collectively to Albany to ask that the AAR be reduced from 8 to 7%. And there was a collective effort to make that happen. There is no such collective effort this year. It's very unfortunate, but there is discord and not widespread agreement among the trustees of the different boards and the actuary. And I would just point out that I think that is a dangerous precedent. We should be speaking collectively and with one voice. We shouldn't have one party trying to force something onto her colleagues that is not widely accepted, and that certain trustees are asking for more time in detail to review. And, you know, I've been lucky serving on the boards for the past 7 years to have had wonderful interactions and experience with trustees from a variety of systems. And I cannot think of another instance where the will of the trustees was so divided and not being taken into consideration. She may have the authority to do this, but it doesn't make it right. And I think, as you know, all parts of the pension system, that we should be trying to work together and come to an agreement before forcing an issue and forcing a vote on something.
Thank you, Ms. Is there anyone else that would like to?
I have something to say, if I may. I agree with you, Susanna. You were talking about having more conversation, more discussion. Well, isn't that what we call process? I'm not comfortable supporting this resolution. It's something that goes against the mandated legislative requirement of the state. But more importantly, of all the years that I've been on the board, I've learned it's not the ultimate decision that we make that is the most important thing. The most important thing is the process. And what Susanna described very well is that we had no process. So I'm going to be voting no on the resolution because clearly the assumptions and methods used in the calculations are just inconsistent with the required practices. The calculation reflected in this resolution is incorrect. The IRR is codified in statute. It's 7%. As we speak, as we sit here, it is 7%. So I believe the actuary must use the 7% rate to calculate the employer contributions. And am I wrong by thinking that the 7% rate can be changed only by an act of legislature? I'm uncomfortable because of the lack of the process here. Everyone knows I love process. Give me the process. Let's hear from everybody. Let's have consensus. Let's hear people's opinions. This was thrown off. Am I correct that this was taken off the table last month? So when it was taken off the table last month, I said, okay, done deal. I didn't even give it a second thought. Had I known it was going to be brought back this month, I would have had a whole month to discuss it or think about it and develop some opinions. But just because of the lack of the process is the reason why I'm voting this down. And I must say, for the record, that I have tremendous respect for the Office of the Actuary. And I would like, as Susanna well said, to continue the conversation, to continue the dialogue, and to talk about it. Once we all talk about it, then the process has been completed and we can go on record, and whatever the decision is, we can live with the process, which is the fiduciary and the prudent way to come to a decision, such an important decision as we're making now. The most important part of the decision, it's not the decision itself, it is the process. How did we get there? How do we get there? So we need perhaps to vote this down and then to start the process as we should be doing, because we are fiduciaries and we need to do that. So to do the prudent, I could live with that. I would be able to live with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tom Process Brown. Is there anyone else who wants to add anything to? Okay, Mr. Adler.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, can I respond to Mr. Brown first?
Mr. Process, absolutely.
Okay. So Mr. Brown, I just want to say that the respect is mutual, and I have just as much respect for you, Mr. Brown, as well as UFT. I do just want to clarify a couple of points that you made in regards to the process. I am very much for discussion, for a process, and because of that, this is why I proposed to the board back in January, 4 months ago, my initial proposal, so that we can have various months of discussion before we get to the contributions. And in fact, these contributions are usually brought to the board in the March and April timeframe. And one of the reasons why it's so much later in the process, fiscal year rather, is because I did want to give the chance to the board to, be a source to them to discuss any of this and to address any questions that the board might have. So I do want to say, there was time built into it for the process, and it was in no way meant to blindside the board. I did start this, like I said, about 4 months ago. The other thing that I wanted to respond to was, you had made a comment that these are the wrong assumptions and methods to use in calculating the contributions. I do want to be on record to say that I don't believe that these are wrong. As a technical advisor, to this board, one of my duties is to make sure that we are using assumptions and methods that are most calibrated, again, to the retirement system of which the contributions that I'm calculating for. As a technical advisor, I have to have, all ears to the ground, not only, observing New York City, but observing other parts of the country, including, our neighbors in Albany in New York State. They have their directions of where they're going with their assumptions too. And obviously there's a lot of national averages out there that are done by various groups of reporting what certain assumptions are and what direction they're moving. New York City has always been seen as a leader in many regards in terms of actuarial practices or, assumptions and methodologies that they do. I do hope to, New York City continues in that fashion, as a leader, recognized leader in the pension industry. And I feel that that is part of my job to make sure as a technical advisor that this board is aware of all these changes that's going on in the country and to present back to you my actuarial opinion. So in that regard, sometimes, what is, currently in law might not necessarily be my actuarial opinion, and therefore I have the responsibility to make that proposal to the board, just as much as my predecessor did when he felt that the direction of public plans were changing, downward, revising their assumption, their actuarial discount rate assumptions downward. That was a proposal that was made to the board ahead of, what the legislature had said in law. And, surely enough, that was the trend in the direction of the rest of the country. New York State, for example, As we know, their retirement system is at 6.8%. This was done in 2019. And even after they said that they were revising it to, after they adopted it to
okay, so that's not what we're really concerned with. We're concerned with New York, and a trustee's job is really to make sure that our technical advisor is following the law. So I think what, if I may, Mr. Brown, when he said that something was not right or not true, I think what he was saying was that it wasn't in alignment with the law. Not that you were calculating incorrectly, but you were not calculating using what was in law. So we'll go with Mr. Adler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to clarify that, but you said it for me, so thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Adler.
You're muted, John. I'm muted. I apologize. I try anyway. Okay, I would like to try to address the trustees' concerns about adopting a rate that is not currently enshrined in law. So I would propose that we amend the resolution that's been made and seconded to add the words contingent upon the actuarial interest rate being changed by the state legislature, period. So that's an amendment that I would propose to the resolution.
So
and I think Valerie, that addresses the concerns that the trustees have raised about potentially adopting a employer contribution that is not based on the current AIR in law.
Did we take a vote on that motion?
Okay, let's ask Valerie. So Valerie, what is the correct, do we take a vote on the motion now? Do we vote for the amendment? Do we say if we want, go ahead.
If the trustees were comfortable with the amendment, there was consensus on that, you could amend the resolution. You are certainly not compelled to do that, and you could vote on the resolution that is for you, which does not have any contingency language in it.
But Valerie, doesn't the amendment take the consideration of the amendment takes precedence? We do that before we then proceed to consider the motion.
Oh, if the process question, yeah. Yes, I think you would vote on John's proposal.
All right, Mr. Kazansky, did you want to say something?
Well, yeah, so I don't agree with my colleague, even though I love him to pieces. So the statement that John was making is that presumes that we're okay with lowering the discount rate. And that's a presumption that I would argue several of our trustees don't share, right? If we approve an amendment that says that if the AIR is lowered by the legislature, that we're okay with it, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't think that the AIR should be lowered at this moment in time. And I would push back against that. And I would not recommend that we add that. I would recommend that we vote the original motion down, period.
So Valerie, could we vote on the motion first? And then if it passes, we'll add the amendment. Could you do that? What is the, or vote
let's see. I guess what, John, you'd make a motion to amend the resolution that would need to be seconded, and then you would take a vote on the resolution. The amendment
and then
that John is proposing.
Right, the amendment passes or not, and then you would vote on the resolution, either amended or not amended. If there's a second, I agree with Valerie's point.
Okay, Natalie, did you want to
May I just say, before we get to the point of voting on this potential amendment, I'm now, I feel like two issues have been conflated. Madam Chair, I thought your main objection was that the legislation was not enacted yet, and so that the calculations were based on something different from what is currently legislated. And then Mr. Kazansky, you just introduced a new idea that I'm hearing for the first time, that you fundamentally disagree with the decision to lower the discount rate. So am I hearing that correctly?
David, do you want to?
I'm muting myself. Yes. Yeah, no, look, there is legislation currently to keep the 7% for the next 2 years up in Albany. And I have no problem with that legislation, and I have no problem keeping the 7% for the next 2 years at least. And for me to support lowering it, it would be disingenuous. I don't believe we should be lowering it at this moment in time.
Can I just follow up? I am not familiar with this proposal for this 2-year extension. Can you just give me a 12-second understanding of that?
Yeah, so the assumed rate of return expires, I believe,
June 30th.
June 30th.
Sunsets.
Right. And so there is a piece of legislation up in Albany that was introduced to keep the 7% for an additional 2 years.
Okay. And keep in mind that
if that gets passed, then that's what it is.
Right. And the resolution that we're voting on is this package resolution that has a restart, that changes the AIR. You know, it's a package that we have asked time and time again to have it separated, and it's not. So we're really voting on, so yes, we are voting, if we're opposing this to change the 7%, but also we're voting to oppose the entire package with the restart, where we feel that it better, restart is not a good time to do a restart. It's better to continue and really see that money throughout the years, instead of it costing more money down the road. So let's go back to Mr. Adler's amendment. And does
Susanna has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Susanna.
My hand was originally up to speak on the question of the package, so maybe I'll keep it up for that later. But if I may just say something on Mr. Adler's proposed amendment to the resolution. It makes me deeply uncomfortable to begin a precedent for the board to allow themselves to caveat or footnote actions that on their face are inconsistent with fiduciary duty and inconsistent with state law. So I don't think that simply having a footnote saying, oh, well, we realize this is against the legislative intent, but we'll change it later if the legislature acts a certain way or doesn't act a certain way. So from a process standpoint, from a precedent standpoint, from a standpoint of likelihood of what's going to change in Albany, I'm strongly opposed to not only the resolution, but the amendment as stated by my esteemed colleague from the city, Mr. Adler.
Okay, so John proposed an amendment, and we had 2 people speak against the amendment. Is there anyone else that wants to speak for the amendment before we vote, if we're going to put the amendment and then take a vote? Anyone else want to speak for Mr. Adler's amendment? Mr. Buckley.
I don't want to speak out of turn. I know we were given strict guidance on what to reference in attorney-client session and what not to reference. I will then choose my words carefully here in public session, but I look at the process. I look at the precedent.
Mr. Brown, process.
I look at trust the process, go Sixers. I look at the precedent. This has happened before where boards have voted on in 2012 as referenced. Based upon my understanding of the facts, I don't care about the likelihood of one legislation proposal getting passed over the other. To my read, based upon my understanding of the facts, that voting for Mr. Adler's proposed resolution or amendment to the resolution, in my view, would be consistent with my fiduciary duty. So I feel necessary to make that clear on the record ahead of any potential votes on either the proposed resolution or any proposed amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Buckley. All right, Are we ready?
And I will also speak in favor of Mr. Adler's proposed amendment.
Okay.
For the same reason of precedent and my sense of fiduciary duty.
Okay, and so I'll be the third person to speak against it, and I'm speaking against it because when we talk about precedents, to Ms. Vickers' point, that's when everyone was for what the actuary proposed. That's when they were okay with the changing what the AIR was. This is without having the backing, so I'll speak to that. But so let's vote on the amendment and then let's vote on the thing. So Mr. Adler made the amendment. Do I hear a second to the amendment?
Second.
And that's Mr. Buckley. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, so that's Mr. Adler, Mr. Buckley, and Ms. Green-Giles. All those opposed, please say nay.
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 So that is Mr. Kazansky, Mr. Brown, Ms. Penny, and Ms. Vickers. So the amendment has failed. So let's go back and vote on the resolution. Is there anyone else that needs to speak to the resolution? Okay.
I just have one question for Valerie, which I think I can ask in this setting. Valerie, is there a requirement that the system report action taken against the technical advice of the actuary to the Department of Financial Services?
Not that I'm aware of, and I specifically asked that question of our liaison with DFS.
Oh, okay.
So that is not my understanding, nor was our accounting unit who deals with DFS constantly.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
And may I also ask before we vote? I think Mr. Buckley asked this of Ms. Chan earlier. What are the consequences of not voting? What are the actual cash flow consequences if this resolution is not passed today?
So there are different obligors of TRS, one of which is obviously the city, largely of the city. There are charter schools that do pay into TRS that is not the responsibility of the city of New York. So my understanding is, and this is TRS's, administrative, administration. So I don't know if this is true or not, but my understanding is that the contributions have already decreased going into TRS, like on an administrative level, and that's between OMB and TRS. As far as the other obligors go, my understanding is that the latest information they have is the preliminary 21 contributions that were passed a little bit over a year ago by this board. I believe that's the last form of communication that Patricia or TRS has sent to them. So barring any new information, they would be continuing to pay at that rate, which would be a higher amount, which they would be overfunding their 21 contributions for fiscal year 21. And if it continues to be that way, obviously there needs to be adjustment made to fiscal year 22.
Sherry, if I may.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't raise my hand, I apologize. But Madam Chair, may I be heard?
Yes, absolutely.
With regard to the monthly contributions we make, those are done in consultation with OMB, and want to make the board members sure that we pay the contributions timely and at the amount that OMB has suggested, and in consultation with them. I think that there was some adjustment made, and it was based on the fact that there was a belief that when the true-up was submitted, there would be a lesser amount there, or an adjusted amount that would be, in a sense, in the city's favor. But as I said, I do want to make the board members rest assured that we pay our contributions monthly, we pay them on time, and they're done in consultation with OMB.
Thank you, Mr. McTeague. And again, I just want to remind everyone that last year when we were talking about preliminary contributions, it was based on the 7% with what was in law. So unfortunately, this calculation came with a calculation that is not part of the law. And so that's why Ms. Green-Giles, I'm sure, had that question. So let's go on to vote. Are we ready to vote for the resolution? All right, all those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
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 Mr. Buckley, Mr. Adler, and Ms. Green-Giles. All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Nay. Nay. Vickers, Mr. Kazansky, Ms. Penny, and Mr. Brown. So the resolution fails. So I'm going to ask Madam Actuary to come back with a calculation using what is in law now, the 7%. And I will remind you that we have a 2-year extension in Albany, and we're going to ask you for a fiscal note on that. Okay. And
can I just ask Ms. Penny, when you say the we, who is the we?
So
that has that? It's not TRS, right?
No. Yeah, our person in Albany has drafted this bill for us, and it's.
When you say our, are you referring to the UFT?
Yes, the UFT. The UFT. The teacher trustees have asked to extend it. What's been done in the past, right, Mr. Thad? Do you remember the year that they had the 2-year extension? So this is something that was, I think it was done twice before, a 2-year extension. So we decided to put forth legislation to do that again.
2 years ago, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
It was chapter 71, maybe?
It was chapter 76, I believe.
Thank you, Valerie.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We'll certainly keep you posted on that. Okay, so we have one more resolution to go.
Debbie?
Yep.
I have some follow-ups on the vote that was just taken.
Sure.
Is it appropriate to raise them now?
Follow-ups in regard to that?
On that same subject?
Sure.
So I just wanted to clarify that that the board is officially asking the actuary to resubmit to the board a recalculated employer contribution based on 7%. And so I just wanted to make sure that was in the record. And I also wanted to ask the actuary, in light of the fact that many trustees support many of the changes to the assumptions and methods that you have put forth, I'm asking if the actuary would reconsider her position in light of the trend of boards not being in support of the package if it includes a 7%. I'm asking if the actuary would rethink her position that this is a package and, would agree that the boards could consider all of the assumptions and methods, save for the reset and the 7%, since it hasn't been changed by the legislature. So that's something that you don't have to answer now, but I would like you to consider going forward, because I think having an opportunity to forge consensus around 90 or 95% of your recommendations would be a very positive and healthy thing for all of the boards and the actuary to participate in.
So, I know, Suzanne, you're not looking for an answer right now, but I just want to, give you my initial thoughts, which is really reiterating what I had said earlier in response to Mr. Kazansky's comments, that, obviously this is not the only package that I would sign on to and agree to. And in fact, in developing this package, there have been iterations of packages that were proposed both to the union side and the city side throughout this process. And those iterations were prior iterations, but they were packages that are different than what is in front of the board and ones that I had agreed to. So, in that fashion, if, the state legislature does not retroactively adopt 6.95% for this fiscal year, obviously there would be a requirement to calculate it at 7%. But as I stated before, it's not just as simple as taking out, one piece of the package, but, taking out one piece is also going to have an effect on other pieces of the package too. So it will be in a different fashion than what's been presented to the board.
Right. Well, I think that I'm gratified that there are other packages that consist of different pieces. I'm sorry that that not everybody got to see those, but I look forward to seeing an alternative package whenever you're ready to present them.
And so I would think, since this is important that we have this number correct, so by the next board meeting, we need a recalculation at 7%. So Madam Actuary, we're asking you to please recalculate whether we've asked you to take apart this package, whether the package is taken apart or not. We'd like to see this package with the 7% because that's what the law is right now. Mr. Kaczynski, you had your hand raised first, and then I think Mr. Adler.
No.
Mr. said exactly what I was going to say.
I'm sorry, can I respond to that request first, Madam Chair, to your request? And, what I was going to say was, I will be, proposing a package that, once the law is settled, I will be proposing a package that is, whether it's with the bill that is going to be passed or another iteration of the bill that's going to pass, I will be reflecting that in my contributions. But I do want to note that, last time that the interest rate was proposed to be decreased, like I said, it was a process of, a couple years. And during that time, it was the proposed rate was being used. And so I don't think we know a final answer of what the, ultimate rate to be used is. And, I cannot promise that a month from now, I can come back with contributions that are, reflective of a full package that I would be on board about, because, there are these calculations take months to calculate. Valuations, we get the data for the end of the fiscal year around the fall time, and we bring it to the board about 5-6 months later. So again, I just want to set expectations that this is not something that we necessarily can do and come up with in a month.
So let me be clear. I'm asking you to do the calculations with what is in the law, and the law has 7%. So I'm asking you to come back with the calculations using 7%. Should the law change, we can address that at that time. But right now, we need a calculation at 7%. And that is my request as the chair. Okay. All right, so we have one more resolution to go.
Russell has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Russell.
No, we can move on. I think every party has made their opinions known at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Patricia, our last resolution.
All right, so the last resolution is the actuary's determination to the preliminary fiscal year 2022 employer contribution to the New York City Teachers Retirement System.
Please skip to the resolved.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees hereby approves a preliminary fiscal year 2020 employer contribution to the New York City Teachers Retirement Board System, of $3,275,390,995.
Thank you, Patricia. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kaczynski. A second? Thank you, Mr. Adler. And so discussion, and I'm just going to say, for all the reasons that we just mentioned, ad nauseum maybe, I'm totally against this. So anyone want to discuss this before we take a motion, before we vote?
I'd like to just confirm on the record. I think Patricia had said 2020. This is the preliminary 2022.
Right.
2022 employer contribution. And my understanding that is that the calculation embedded in this number uses a AAR of 6.9%.
Okay. Is that true, Madam Actuary? It's
yes, I didn't know that was a question. I thought that was a
statement. Sorry. It was a statement, but thank you for supporting the statement.
Just to be clear on that. Is there anyone else that would like to discuss? Mr. Adler?
Well, I'd like to offer the same amendment for this one that I offered for the last one, recognizing that The votes will be the same, but I'd still like to be on the record in support of this resolution with the amendment that it be contingent on the actuarial interest rate being approved by the state legislature.
Okay, great.
So
then you'll be a second. So now we're ready to vote. All those in favor of an amendment to this resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's Ms. Green Giles, Mr. Buckley, and Mr. Adler. All those opposed to the resolution, to the amendment to the resolution, please say nay.
Nay.
Ms. Vickers, Mr. Kazansky, Ms. Penny, and Mr. Brown. Okay, so the amendment fails. Anything else before we take a vote for the resolution? Okay. All right. All those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Buckley,
Aye.
Mr. Adler, Ms. Green Giles. All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Vickers, Mr. Kazansky, Mr. Brown, and Ms. Penny. So the motion fails. And I'm going to ask the actuary to do the same thing. Please come back to the board with a resolution that uses the AIR that's in effect right now according to the law, which is 7%. Okay, so we've asked the actuary for two different resolutions, the resolutions to be redone with 7% to reflect what is in the law now. And we will be sending.
I will point out, Ms. Penny, I will point out that as you have stated, the current actuarial interest rate expires on June 30th. So there is no actuarial interest rate in the law for fiscal year 22, which begins on July 1st, 2022.
Yep, so it stays.
Just a point of effect.
So I believe it stays into effect, but we do have a resolution. We do have a piece of legislation to extend the 7%, as I said, for 2 years. So with Madam Actuary's assistance, we'll get a fiscal note, and hopefully that will get passed. Or if there's another legislation. So we've asked, we didn't see any legislation. We have a person that works in Albany. We've been looking for some legislation that says they're trying to change the 7%, even though labor does not approve it or does not, sorry.
Deborah, can I ask a question that actually was something that I wanted to bring up during the meeting? If I read it correctly, the board was given a copy of a fiscal note done recently by the actuary this morning. And the fiscal note was for legislation to reduce the AIR from 7 to 6.9% or 6.8% eventually. Can I ask the actuary, was that legislation that has been sponsored by a member of the legislature and submitted in Albany, or was it just an exercise in a kind of what if that legislation was drafted and submitted and had sponsors?
So the legislation right now is in proposed legislation form.
So it's proposed by you or proposed by a member of the legislature?
It's not sponsored by the legislature. It's being proposed, and my office does not propose legislation.
Who is proposing it?
It's not called proposed legislation as in someone proposed it. It's called proposed legislation because it doesn't have an LBDC number to it yet. Okay,
so if I'm understanding this correctly, the legislation to reduce the AIR has not been submitted or proposed by any member of the state legislature, but legislation to extend the AIR at 7% for 2 years has been submitted and proposed by the legislature. Was that the state of play?
What's the bill number? Who's the sponsor? Who's the sponsor of the legislation? What's the bill number for the bill that you described, Deb?
Yeah, well, we have it up there. It's not yet. It's on its way. Yeah,
So
it's on its way. We're waiting for the
neither one.
Right, we're waiting for the fiscal note. Exactly. So who drafted so again, so we've been talking about, and I think that's the part that everyone should be, that should be the takeaway. We are talking about a package that is based on an AIR that doesn't even have legislation. It keeps talking about when the legislation passes, but the legislation isn't anywhere yet. Is there a bill number, or who submitted the legislation?
I think, Madam Chair, I don't, that's not my responsibility in the city to track the bill. I will say, it's probably in the similar stage as your extension bill. I don't know how far it is being introduced, or if there's been a sponsor on it yet or not. I can't state.
I believe the city has written and is proposing the legislation, but I don't know what the status is.
So the Mayor's Office of Legislative Affairs drafted legislation to reduce the AIR without support of the trustees of the 5 New York City systems and the MLC.
Well,
and all of the partners.
Until yesterday, the MLC was on record supporting the package. So that changed yesterday.
Well, I don't think they were supporting the package. I think the MLC on record was asking and that was done in, I don't know, over the summer last year, almost a year ago, was asking the actuary to actually look at some of the methods, not to tell her to reduce the AIR or anything else, just asking her to look. And I believe, so the MLC is supporting the 2-year extension. And so we will have a sponsor soon, as well as a bill number. So I think that was one of the problems. Okay, so we're still back to, back to the resolution, the last resolution. And so again, for all of those reasons, and did we take the vote? We took the vote. What else do we want to discuss about it?
I'm not sure we took a.
No, we're going to take
John
now.
On John's motion. Is that where we are?
I think we took
the vote on the amendment. We took the vote on the amendment. It did not pass. Now we want to take a vote on the resolution. Okay, you ready to take a vote on the resolution? All right. All those in favor of the resolution the way it stands, we did talk about this. Please say aye.
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 I believe we did this already.
I know, because I know I asked the actuary to please come back. It's like deja vu. Okay, so Madam Actuary.
So much fun, we wanted to do it again.
One more time, see if it's any different. So again, we're going to ask you to please come back with this resolution with the 7% that is on the law. Mr. Buckley, are you trying to confuse me by raising your hand now?
I'm curious.
It's going to be like Groundhog Day. We'll do this all over again.
Listen, I know you're referring to Mr. Brown as the process guy, but I also like to consider myself a process guy as well. So I'm curious just to ask the Madam Actuary relative to your 2 requests, Chair Penny, Madam Chair. Given that the underlying basis of this AIR change is a CPI decrease, and that's what's driving the year-over-year AIR decrease, with respect to just how complicated many of these actuarial calculations are, what is a relative ETA for a revised employer contribution for 2 years based upon Madam Chair's request? So I'm just curious.
I would have to talk to staff, but I would envision sometime later on this summer. And, there's a lot of complexities, that I've already stated. Obviously we're in the end of the legislative session, as we all know, and so there's other priorities with fiscal notes too. And, not just deadline and resource capacity issues, but, you raised the point about the CPI, and which is the underlying change in the discount rate change. As stated in my memo in January, the CPI that's underlying it affects 4 other changes, or 3 other changes for total. And, I cannot support a CPI for one assumption for like the discount rate and support another, CPI for another another, assumption such as the salary growth or the COLA and escalation. So, there's that doesn't make sense. There's also, obviously BERS is another retirement system that has accepted this. So to use different underlying CPI assumptions for, two retirement systems of the same geographic location, again, does not make sense. And there's other, those are just some of the concerns that I have and some of the wrinkles that, I have to think through in order to proceed with it. The other thing I will say is that, the board is looking for a 7% calculation of the contributions. Obviously, the preliminary contributions for 21 that the board has adopted a year ago, that obviously has the 7% assumptions built into it.
And so I want to go on the record to saying that's very unfortunate if you say we can't have this done and it's going to take this summer. We have asked as the actuary, it is your duty to do this according to the law. And you did it predicated on legislation that wasn't even introduced. So it really, I just find it unbelievable that we're in this situation, having to ask you to come back again with another resolution and creating whatever, unfortunately, extra work for your office when this should have been done correctly and by the law to begin with. And to send us a fiscal note with legislation the day before this board is voting on it, without that even being introduced with a bill number and supporters, sponsors, just goes beyond what I could imagine. So it's unfortunate, and I really think that your office could move a little bit faster on it, since we had proposed these totals last year based on 7%. So I would think that it could be done a little bit faster. I'm sorry, Ms. Vickers, you had your hand raised.
I do want to respond to you, Madam Chair, when I get the opportunity to.
Sure, I think Ms. Vickers and then Ms.
I was going to basically say something very similar to you, Deborah. And, the actuary's office is making a choice of what numbers to pursue and to work on. And again, along with the mayor's office, who I've just learned is submitting legislation that doesn't have the full backing of all 5 systems. I just think it's very unfortunate that the actuary and the mayor are choosing to pursue and to spend resources pursuing a course of action that doesn't have the full support of all of the trustees, and then tell us that there isn't time to react to the requests of the board because they're spending time doing things that aren't supported by all 5 systems.
And unfortunately, there are 10 days left for state legislation, 10 days left. So all of this has to be done within 10 days. So, and I'm sorry, someone was next. Oh, Madam Actuary.
So yes, I want the board to be aware of the valuation process. Again, we get data, we have data meetings to discuss the valuation around, the summer, and we get the data in the fall. And for us to come up with our valuations, it takes a few months for it to process until, January, February timeframe. And that's why we bring it to the board in March. So it's not unrealistic that, having to not only redo a valuation, but to relook at a balanced package of assumptions and methods, which that took, the request from MLC originally came in, I believe, in August or October timeframe. And, it wasn't until obviously January that there was a plan. So, there's overlapping things to be done at the same time. And, having to expedite the workload in my office, giving it a turnaround time of a few months is already very quick. And in terms of, Susanna making the accusation that, we've been spending our time doing something else rather than running these running these new contributions, keep in mind that I was just asked this like about an hour ago to run new valuations. It wasn't like I was sitting here not doing it and spending time on fiscal notes, which is another priority that I have statutorily to be doing. And, I want to reiterate again that I brought this proposal to the board in January to have discussions so that we did not have to be down to the wire for me to be calculating new assumptions.
Right, and we have had discussions, and in each one of those discussions, the board has said, we support 90% of your assumption and method change recommendations, and we'd like to act on those parts, but you've insisted that it's a package, and, you know, brought us to, you know, this cliffhanger of what do we do because we can't break apart the package, instead of coming to a compromise of the 90% we can all agree on and moving ahead with those assumption and method changes. We're not able to support those changes that we support because there are other things in the package that, that we can't remove.
Thank you, Ms. Vickers. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Let's wake up Patricia.
Did Mr. Buckley have his hand up? Oh no, not anymore.
All I'll say is, you know, I feel like we've tabled this month after month since January, and I understand that changing the CPI has a trickle-down effect because of the building block methodology on lots of things. So I completely understand why this might take months for the Office of Actuary to calculate.
Well, and again, to Ms. Vickers' point, we have tabled it because we have asked the actuary to take it apart and give us some of it because we have never approved changing the 7%. And so I guess it was a bit of a standoff, and now here we are, and that's unfortunate. Okay. All right. Calendar. Do we approve the calendar yet?
Right. So next is the calendar. Let me just pull it up. We should have done that to begin with, I guess.
Patricia, I think it goes without saying we can waive the reading of the calendar.
Thank you.
I want to hear the whole calendar now.
Oh, you're going to punish me.
John, you're breaking up. I can barely hear you.
Patricia, we would need a motion just on approving the minutes.
Yep.
Right, that's what I was just about to do. So, all right, the first thing is a matter of the minutes. And we're looking for a motion for the approval of the April 5th investment meeting minutes and the April 15th board meeting minutes.
So moved.
I didn't even ask. Mr. Brown, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kazansky. All those in favor? Any discussion about the minutes? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, abstentions? Okay, the minutes pass.
Okay, so for the rest of the items, they were waived, the reading was waived, but I just want to remind everybody that you did receive an electronic version of the calendar. And so then we can have a motion for the...
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the calendar?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gazansky. Even though Ms. Riley did not read it to us, do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Calendar passes. And now our favorite part.
Well, I do have a comment.
Yeah,
just wanted to congratulate David Kazansky on his re-election to the board by the teachers of the city of New York. So congratulations, David.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations, David.
Happy to
talk about a cliffhanger, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Stop the count.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments from the public? No one? Okay. All right. Hearing none then, do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Vickers. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, everyone else, we're going into executive session now. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be coming back if you want to hear a recap. And if not, have a very good evening.
Okay.
Let's report out.
Certainly. In executive session, we discussed a policy issue within the emerging markets space. Consensus was reached, which will be announced at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Ms. Stang. Is there anything else anyone would like to say before we adjourn? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Vickers. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.